So I am first going to do some introductions. We'll have Dr. Elizabeth Stoichev introduce herself.
Thanks, Veronica, and thanks everybody for hosting. I am happy to be here. I am an associate professor of journalism here in the department. I've been at Wayne State for about 10 years, and my research area is about fake news and privacy and social media. So this panel topic fits squarely within what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then we have Constance Thomas.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Constance Thomas. I am the campaign marketing manager for Detroit Public School Community District, a fellow warrior. I graduated from Wayne State, received my BA in public relations, and I am very thrilled and honored to be on this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Anthony Strickland.
Hello, everybody. Like she said, I'm Anthony's. Hey, I'm a senior director for 98 Forward. We are the largest Black-owned or minority-owned agency in the state, and we're based in Detroit. And yeah, I'm a Spartan though. Sorry, I went to Michigan State, but I love my Wayne State family as well. I'm very, very active with all of you as well too. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Jeff Adkins.
Hey everyone, happy to be here. Jeff Adkins, I'm a senior public relations specialist at Henry Ford Health. So I lead all communications for everything cancer and everything neuro and do a whole lot of things in between. I graduated from Wayne State with my BA in PR back in 2014. I hardly believe it's been that long. Shelley taught me everything I know, and here I am.
Cameras on. I want to jump in. I'm interrupting as I normally do. Cameras on, students, if you possibly can. That's the polite way, and that's how we welcome our guests to campus and to teach us, is we turn our cameras on and we smile. Thank you.
All right, we are first going to have Dr. Stoichev kind of introduce what media literacy is, how it affects our everyday life, and what inspired her to create the media literacy course here at Wayne State.
Thanks, Veronica. So the media literacy course here at Wayne State was actually developed in collaboration with Dr. Karen McDevitt. She's on the call today. Hopefully she can give us a wave out. And she really teaches or taught a lot of the fundamentals of media literacy, news literacy in some of her senior level classes. And what she was finding was that students in communication, journalism, PR weren't actually aware and knowledgeable and practicing media literacy in a lot of our higher level courses. So together we came up with the idea and plan for a media literacy class, and it is now a general education option for all undergraduates across campus. And we decided to open it up to as a gen ed because we think media literacy is so important. It's not just us as media professionals who need to be aware and practicing these skills on a daily basis. It's really all about everybody collectively in our society working together to systematically analyze and interpret media messages and understand the effects that they have on us. Media literacy is really important because we spend on average 8, 9, 10, upwards of that hours with media a day. And so it has a really lasting effect on us. And a lot of times that effect is subliminal. We're not aware that it's happening, but it colors who we see people, how we interpret situations, our views on culture, on society, on politics. It touches almost every aspect of our lives. And the other important thing to remember about media is that once you leave the formal K-12 and higher education, formal systems of education, the media is your primary vehicle for learning about the world. And so that's why media is so important. And that's why we as citizens need to be aware of how media is constructed and then the types of different media messages and how they can impact us as individuals.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before we get into it, I just want to mention that we will have time at the end for questions. So as we're going through, if you think of anything, write it down, put it in the chat, and we will get to them at the end. And we are first going to start off with Antonice. And I wanted to ask, as a public relations specialist working with different clients, what fields do you see most affected by misinformation?
Interesting. The most, The industry, I would probably say government and healthcare. And I probably would say that because of experience working in both of those industries. And I feel like those spaces are places where a lot of public opinion drive what people choose to believe or what side they're on. And I feel like it's easier for misinformation to be kind of like put out there and carried and just, continue to pass along. I feel like also emotions are very connected in those industries. So where aligning with a side can sometimes be a little bit more important to someone than the facts. So I would say government and healthcare, in my opinion, would make sense.
Jeff, do you agree with that? Has that been your experience as well, working in healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Anthony's hit the nail on the head there with, the potential of misinformation to spread. And so obviously, healthcare is another one of those industries where there's a lot of misinformation out there and people have got to be really vigilant in getting their info from credible sources.
And what resources or tactics have you relied on in your field to kind of combat that misinformation?
Yeah, we've got a pretty robust team, not only on the media front, like on my team, but I work really closely with our social media teams. People are pretty vocal, commenting on things like Facebook posts, Twitter, replying to our stories on Instagram. And they're pretty vigilant, our team, actually, in responding and correcting misinformation. So that's been one really valuable way. We also have a blog that gets a lot of traffic. And they talk about a lot of really topical things. It's really sort of consumer centric. And so, that's one way that we get information out there, credible information to people on topics that they want, to learn more about. And then also, in my own work at the media side, anytime I'm citing sources, if a lot of times data will come just from our leadership and from our teams and our researchers. And so I've got that info. But if I'm citing statistics, I'll use .gov sources, the CDC, driving people back to those kind of sources of information just from a credibility standpoint.
Awesome. And then is there like a specific example of a time where you had to kind of combat that in your field and when you had to reach out to those resources and tactics?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time real recently, actually, there was a study published, and basically what the study had concluded was that the use of anesthesia, a lot of times there's a lot of waste to it. Which can actually impact, it has a somewhat, over time, significant contributor to climate change. So we're saying, being more mindful of the waste and making sure people are getting only how much they need and you're not, being wasteful is what this research study was saying, can over time make a lasting impact on climate change. Well, unfortunately, that message got misconstrued out there, and a lot of, really prominent political commentators sort of ran with it and made the message something that it wasn't. And people, sort of take that at face value, but you have to remember political commentators really are not journalists. I mean, they're looking at something through their lens. And so it's really important anytime that you see something like that to differentiate them from, say, an actual journalist. But a lot of people don't. And so we, put out a statement on all of our channels, very, very clearly dispelling that we're not giving people less anesthesia than they're supposed to get. This study is saying that there's opportunity to reduce waste and thus, over time, positively impact the climate.
Got it. And Constance, working in education, how has misinformation affected you in your field?
Thank you for that question, which is a really good question. One interesting thing is that this is a national issue, right? And being in education, it's really about how the young people use social media. And what students may think is a joke is what we take very seriously. Anything that we see that students may post, we take it seriously because you never know what's real and what's not, right? But also you have to understand what's real to them may be fake to us, and it's like it's really not that important, but then what's real to us is fake to them. So when you have students that may put something out there and they're inside of a school, and when you have local officials come and administrators and they're rushing through an area and it was like, oh, it's just a joke, you can't put that out there and not expect serious reactions. And I think social media with this, as time continues to, I say, grow and technology continues to evolve, and the way we use it and how we use it really affects the way in terms of education. Because I mean, we went through a global pandemic. We're still in it because it's still out there. And we're getting back to real life and in person, but still virtual. We have to look at it from a different lens, because this is what we're dealing with, right? Virtually. So whatever is being put out there, we are going to look at it. We're going to comb through it. We're going to see, track it. When was it sent? Does it make sense? And understand the severity of it. So overall, I'll just say it is really how the students use it, but we also just monitor it. We're now actually about to hire a new social media manager. We used to have one, and then we are now finally about to get another one, because the bandwidth and there's so much action that's going on out there. We want to be able to track it, even though we're a team of 3 right now, about to be a team of 4. It's still so much. It's so many platforms that we have to touch, that we want to make sure that we're giving out the right response. We're giving out, what's on brand and on target from our superintendent, Dr. Nikolai Viti, making sure that that is presented well as if it's coming from a school, what their messages is saying. So from the district level, and then also the school level too. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Anthony, can you provide an example of a situation where you had to actively manage misinformation for a client?
Yes, I was excited you put this in the questions, because I have one that I say to people often. So, and it's in the healthcare field. I had a client that was a hospital, and what had happened, I remember they released the patient, and somehow the family couldn't find the patient. So the family went to the news. It was like they went ham. They were like, oh my goodness, they let our person go. We don't know where he is. They should have called us. They ran with it. And one thing I always say with my clients, and I think it's very important, like, you have to treat your PR person or your PR team like the lawyer. I need to know all the information. I need to know what are the rules, what are the protocols, what is your process with releasing patients? Like, and if something bad did happen, tell me so I can know and we can get prepared and do all of that. But anyway, that's what happened. The family went to the news station. So a few things that helped prevent this from becoming a larger story of misinformation. Again, asking the client everything that happened, all those details. But additionally, I had a strong relationship with that producer at the station, which I think is what helps us as PR professionals, because a big part of the work we do is our relationships with our media partners, and our really strong and trusted media partners, to add that piece there. So it really became a conversation with he and I, where let me get all the information before you just run with the story. Literally, give me 2 hours, something of that nature. And he did, because we have a trusting relationship. I'm not going to give him false information. He's not going to send out false information. So yeah, I ended up working with the client. We put together a statement. The family ended up finding their family member, and he just didn't let them know he made it home. It was literally a full misinformation situation. And I know emotions get very high, which is why I said healthcare, it gets very emotional. People's emotions get involved, and you may not really take that, the factual information. But anyway, so by the time I spoke with the producer again, I'm like, well, they found him. This is what their protocol is. They did everything that they were supposed to do. And the family knew that he was going to be released that day. They ended up not even running the story, because it was no longer a story for them to push out. So I like to give that example, because it shows, one, obviously that misinformation, how emotions can really drive that. 2, the importance of us building these relationships as practitioners, so that we can kind of help eliminate a lot of misinformation, because that trust is there, and that relationship is there, and that barrier of just getting information just pushed out. And then also, once you give the facts, sometimes there may not even be a story there anymore. So you're able to kind of really get a win and a solid situation for your client too. So that was a very stressful day though. Lots of phone calls.
Yes. And I know that we keep talking about healthcare, and so I'm going to go back to Jeff. I think it's just really prevalent in your area especially, but how do you keep up with the ever-changing news? There are things coming out every day. How do you decipher what to focus on, what's misleading?
I'm taking a look at you know, as far as what to focus on, I mean, you see that certainly in what's breaking news, what's getting a whole lot of traction, and then it usually doesn't take too long to spot the misinformation that follows. Some of the ways that we've combated that, especially since COVID, I mean, we got into the habit and still do them sort of in a less consistent cadence now, but for a couple years there, we were hosting, virtual media briefings with our expert on all these topics that had just a whole slew of misinformation around it, anything around vaccine hesitancy with the COVID vaccine to flu and RSV and all kinds of stuff. The threat of a tridemic and people thinking that it was going to be some catastrophic situation, which thankfully it wasn't. But we basically took a look at what was really topical, what was getting a lot of traction, and then what are the messages that need to be correctly delivered and what needs to be dispelled as far as misinformation, and we would address those. For a time there, we were doing those twice a week. Then we were doing them once a week, and now we kind of do them more on like an as-needed basis since things have cooled down a little bit. But I mean, you see a lot. We get a lot of feedback from our social team, what they're seeing. We have a whole care experience team. So anytime someone's got a complaint, or if they fill out a contact us form, they'll reach out. Sometimes there's elements of that where they're sort of reacting to a situation and maybe they don't have reliable sources of info, and so we are proactive in taking all that in and making sure that we are delivering consistent, accurate messaging.
I'm not where he worked, but what is he talking about?
Thank you so much. And then if we go to Constance, you have such a big community relying on you for information. What is the process like for you of fact checking yourself, making sure that your information is accurate before you put it out?
Well, I will say, one, we work collaboratively with our communications department, which is led by Crystal Wilson. With her team, we handle it in terms of like if it's getting out to the media and if it's something like really heavy and serious that we want to get in front of the people on our larger mass or avenue, I'll say, she'll handle it from the news media portion of it. But outside of that, we really handle our social media channels. We communicate with our families on so many levels, right? If, like say, inclement weather or even the power right now that's happening. Yes, Crystal is a Wayne State alum as well, and PRSSA, she's heavily involved there. Just amazing person, amazing person. I was actually happy when I came to the district to actually work with her. Side note. But when it comes to, let's say, situations with the power outage that happened, we have about like 16 schools right now that are without power. We have to be able to provide that information to our families before they wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, so we push that by a robocall, robotext. We also, you're going to get it by email. We send it when it comes to staff, our internal intranet, which we call the hub, also the district's website, but then we're also pushing it out on our every social media platform, Facebook, Twitter. We'll handle some things on LinkedIn, being able to Instagram. We want to push out as much as we can, how we can, to reach the masses. And so being able to do that, we can reach people. And then from there, sometimes I think the helpful part when it comes to social media, other family members are able to share it. So if you have your community of parents in schools, one parent may see it, but they know, I don't know if they saw it and they know somebody who probably doesn't check it as much. It's that quick reshare, right? Or you get that link, share the link, put it in the family chat, put it in the group chat or the parent chat, right? And say, hey, you guys, did you see this? Are you aware? We want to be able to make sure that we're touching all avenues to connect with our community because we're serving over 48,000 students, right? We are the largest district in the state of Michigan. So that is a lot of schools, a lot of families that we are serving, and we want to make sure that they are able to access us, even the parent groups and the parent page that we have on Facebook. People communicating with us that way. Even during the time when students were virtual, you had parents who will reach out to us via Facebook Messenger. That was the way, that was their mode of communication, was Facebook Messenger. I can't get online. How do I log on? I'm trying to connect with this teacher. Can you help me find this? I need to change my child's school. What information do I have? Sometimes, we want to meet people where they are. at the end of the day. And if meeting them where they are is if the parent is on Instagram, that is where we're going to meet them and literally having serious conversation. If the parent is heavily involved in Facebook and that's how they're communicating, we want to make sure that we're available to them to be able to provide them the information that they need when it comes from us, coming again as high as Dr. VD, but then sometimes we would even make it specific. So if it's just those specific schools, we're sending it out from a school level in terms of it's coming from the principal and the principal sending it out through the email blast of their families within that school to them to make sure that they have it. So it's all about meeting them where they are, but also understanding the severity of what that circumstance is. If it's from a district level, it's going to hit kind of high. It's going to come from media. It's going to come from the district social media channels. But if it is from a school specific area, it's going to come from the school's website page. It's going to come from the school's Instagram page or their Facebook page, because that's where all the families are. So it's always about meeting them where they are and making sure they get the right information. And it's always checking. It's education. You got to check everything. It's like grading a paper, making sure that it was written right. Kids are reading is fundamental, as we know, those sayings, but we're constantly fact checking. We're constantly seeing if this is true, because we have to. And it's all about the safety of our students. Honestly, it is about the safety of our students. So we have to check, and we are going to comb through that as much as we can and make sure that is accurate. Because if it's coming from us, it's like, well, the school said this and you don't want that to happen, because then that takes it to a whole nother level. Then it leaves from Detroit, Metro Detroit, to now it's nationally. Oh, Detroit Public School has sent the wrong message and they said, so we can't afford. Literally, we cannot even afford to do that. We have to make sure we have everything, all our ducks are in a row before we even push anything out.
I love that you said meeting them where they're at. I think that's so important across the board, knowing your audience and being able to meet them where they're at. For Dr. Stoichkov, when doing research as a professional and as a student, I think it could be applied to, what are some of the resources that you have found most helpful?
Well, factcheck.org is a great place to start. But what news organizations are doing across the country now, what research has shown is that people don't read news retractions as much. That doesn't have as much of an impact as fresh new news. So how news organizations are combating disinformation is kind of putting out a flood of factual information and flooding the information environment with the real story, actual factual information and reporting that's been done well. So if there is a disinformation rumor that has been circulating, news organizations, your local news organizations are still the best place to go. Detroit has an amazing news community. We are the 12th largest media market in the whole country. Our local presence here has been phenomenal. So one of the best organizations for combating disinformation surrounding COVID was Bridge Magazine. They were one of the nation's leaders in putting out accurate, reliable information on a daily basis. So we have really, really reliable news media here, and I would rely on them more than anything else.
Thank you. And Antonius, I know you've worked in a lot of different backgrounds besides just agency in different industries. What's another time that you had to combat misinformation, and how did you do that?
Another time, I didn't think of two of them. No, I'm just kidding. 2 examples. Okay, I could use an example during my time working in DC, which also, so outside of healthcare, now on the government side. So we were running a campaign around women's preventative services. And this was during the time where, they were thinking about getting rid of birth control, or like not allowing us accessibility to get to that. But there was also a big piece of a lot of women didn't know what actually fell underneath preventative services. Like they can ask for certain scans and, all of those kind of things, but they just weren't aware. But it was being put out there that like, you can't get it, or it's too expensive, or this is why we're not getting our services and everything. So we literally had to shift the narrative and kind of like actually shift and control the narrative, and really kind of make sure that women did know, especially women in, Black and Brown communities, which were systemically marginalized when it comes to some of these services, knew that they could, and that it was covered under their healthcare insurance. It's not anything extra that they had to do. There's no other layers to it. This is what you are, what you're provided. So I want to say that was probably one of the bigger campaigns I actually had the opportunity to work on. And we really did reach women nationally. It wasn't even just here in Washington, D.C. We went to Detroit, we traveled to California, we traveled to Atlanta. Obviously we were in Maryland, the DMV area. But it was a kind of a different way of shifting that misinformation and really just kind of making sure that they knew they had access to this. And that's kind of like using our tools as PR professionals or communicators. How are we getting the message to those people where they could receive it? Because not everybody is watching the news. Not everybody is even on Instagram or social media. Like, I know a lot of times at the agency that I work at right now at 98.4, very traditional ways of reaching people, whether those are flyers or handouts or, back in the day when we were still at church, in the churches. So really finding unique ways to make sure the correct and accurate information is in the hands of the people that need to see it. And just that narrative is out there. So yeah, that would probably be one of my favorite ones too, that I worked on.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my next question is going to be, how do you push through that noise to get your information to your audience? There's just so many sources and everyone's trying to get to it the fastest and the soonest. So how do you push through that and get your information to where it's supposed to be?
Was that to me again too? I dropped my earpod.
Oh, no, that was actually, well, it can be for
cool,
anybody. I think it's relevant to anyone. Jeff, have you had an issue with that, getting your information to your audience and pushing through all that noise?
I think it comes down to being consistent and timely, being an accurate and reliable source of information. People know to look to you for that, because you really build credibility by over time providing consistent, accurate, and timely information. And the more you do that, I think the more people look to you. So we try to be very proactive with all of our avenues, ranging from dozens of different, even internal communications assets. But I mean, that, of course, the media and the social media side all working together.
Yes, I think
I'd like to add just a quick thing too, that I think we use just like without thinking sometimes, but really leveraging our networks. Like, it may not really need to come from, like what we were saying earlier, it may not really need to come from a news source. It may need to come from that family member, that, the grandparent or the child. So I think leveraging our networks, whether it's the media, an influencer, a specific person in that community, to really help combat that misinformation, because people will trust their uncle or their aunt sometimes before they trust, seeing Josh Landon on TV. No shade to Josh, I love him, he's a great guy. But I'm just saying, sometimes people, it's understanding who has the most trusting voice. And I think utilizing those networks or leveraging those is important too, with combating misinformation.
I would agree. I actually would agree. What we do sometimes, we also use what we love using now, Nextdoor. Like really getting within the neighborhoods, right? Because again, schools are in the neighborhoods, but sometimes touching them in those platforms. So yes, you have the larger ones like we spoke of prior to, but then Nextdoor is a great one. Also, the community partners, we spoke about the churches, like you have some churches that are connected to certain schools or certain neighborhoods within the area. Make sure that they get our information as well. And then they're able to like reshare it, push it out. So it's actually being, again, spread out more. One of the campaigns that we work really hard on is making sure enrollment is always taken care of. And what happened during the pandemic, which was just a really great example, you're so used to seeing people inside the building. Once we started to get inside the building, we had a lot of students that did not return. They were still at home. So we worked really hard and created this campaign with our enrollment team, and we started canvassing. We created flyers, and if they weren't home, you also want to make things that for us, it has to be appealing. It has to pop, something that is going to catch your eye. If it catches your eye, you are going to be inclined to, okay, let me pick it up and read it. So being able to provide that some paperwork saying, sorry, we missed you. You can reach us here, connecting in areas where if they're not home, you still see that we do care. Because at the end of the day, we do, but we want to show them that we do care. So again, like I say, connecting and next door, using those different networks that you may not see. Sometimes actually getting the word out, it really helps is our Divine Nine, our Black Greek letter organizations, being able to push that information out there, making sure that they have it, because a lot of those members, I'm a part of a sorority, part of our sorority members, their children attend DPSCD. So by attending that, making sure that they have it and sharing it on those platforms. So it's so many different ways to connect with people because it's network, word of mouth, community, your village, however you want to call it, to be able to push that out. So that was a really good point, Anthony. So I'm glad you said that.
Yes. And then Anthony's one more question. Talking about using your network to get your information out, how do we use these opinion leaders in our industry and kind of have them guiding our message to where we need to get it and helping us get to our audiences and beyond?
I think making sure that they're aligned. Like, I think sometimes people are like, oh, well, he has a whole bunch of followers, or oh, she, whatever the case may be. We have to be very intentional with how we use or leverage these networks. Not everybody, like what I was kind of saying earlier, not everyone is going to listen to this person just because they have 50K followers, or sometimes their engagement is actually pretty low. I may get more followers and I got like 1,000 people following me, so really kind of being very, intentional and aware of like what your goal is, what is that message that you're trying to get out there, why you're trying to use, and why they make the most sense. I think that's kind of like where you have to start with it. We can get the message out, but it has to be purposeful. It has to have some intent, and those goals have to be aligned with that person too. I think sometimes we'll see campaigns from people and it's like, they've never spoke about this in their lives. So it's hard to trust them. Like, it's hard to believe that if you knew this person is vegan, why are they selling pork? Like, it's like you wouldn't believe them. It's like, you don't eat this, you don't like it. Why would you promote it? So, and that's probably a silly example, but I'm just making the point of being very clear on why this person makes sense. Why are these influencers or, spokespeople, why they make sense? I think we actually spoke about this in a PRSA event where we were speaking about influencers before. It may have been last year. Jeff, I think you were on that too. So we were kind of speaking to, being clear on why this person makes the most sense to get this message out. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. And then Jeff, for you as well, in your field, who are your brand ambassadors and how do you get that information where it needs to be?
Some of the best brand ambassadors we have is our workforce. Henry Ford's a huge organization, 33,000 employees. We branched out beyond Southeast Michigan. We've now got quite a presence in South Central Michigan too. So I mentioned some of those internal communications. I mean, we do things, we got a newsletter. It sounds kind of silly. We have this one called Morning Post, and it goes out every morning. And I'll tell you what, a lot of our doctors would rather be in Morning Post than the New York Times, just because the whole entire organization reads it. But, as we've got these press releases or, these blogs, or just we educate our workforce and make sure that they've got accurate information. They take that forward to their friends and families and their own networks. So that's one major way, I would say.
Awesome. And how about you, Constance? Who are those brand ambassadors for you getting that information out there? And I know you mentioned the parent groups, but is it students? Is it outside resources?
Yes, what we started to utilize our students. Right. I am a product of DPS CD. It was DPS back in the day for high school. I went to the Performing Arts High School. And so with DSA currently now, they have this TV studio. They have the students that are actually working in media. Right. And so being able to utilize them. So we have this thing called 5 things. So we go over the 5 things that are really big and hot for the week. We started to utilize students. So students started to deliver the 5 things and we shared it out. So we had the link, and when it would get sent out by robotext, the calls, they'll get a call about it, and then it's sent through the email. We started to make sure, we want to showcase our talents. we want to show who our students are. You seeing me, I mean, yes, I work here, but I'm behind the scenes. You want to hear what a kindergartner has to say. You want to hear what a fifth grader has to say. You want to hear what, some high schoolers have to say. So we start to utilize them, but also let them see what the work is too. So they work behind the scenes, but we also want to get them in front of the portraits. If you are ever driving around the city of Detroit on the Lodge, you may see some things on 94. The future is rising, and we had like crowns on the top of some of the kids' heads, right? Those were actual students from Flicks, from Jerry L. White, from Renaissance. We used that area in that moment, and we grabbed some students there. We also grabbed students from Frederick Douglass. I mean, we're going out all the time. Our videographer, she is out on the grounds. We're rarely in the office because we're a team that we need to be out in the field. We need to be out in the schools because we want to capture content. We want to capture students and teachers and what they're doing, but also parent volunteers. We have a huge push called Let's Read. Let's Read is all about making sure that our students in the second and third grade, that their reading is on point. We have a lot of volunteers. We like to get them out while these volunteers from the community are in the schools working with the students. We want to show the good things. And I think that's the big thing, is about telling the good news of what's happening in the district, but also showing that, the added of, real people, not actors. These are real students. And if you're talking like, yeah, that was me, I did that. So that's kind of how we push it out, how we have our ambassadors. Our students are our ambassadors every day. Every day. I literally told that to some of our students. The High School Leadership Council, they meet here at a central office once a month. And they came in, and I was telling them, I said, when you leave the house, you're representing your family, you're representing your school, because there was a young man that actually showed up to the meeting in pajama pants. And the students went on him. This was a business meeting. This is a professional meeting. Like, they were really going on him. And he was like, but this is what I'm comfortable in. And so again, that the times are changing and what you think is comfortable and acceptable. And so we had the discussion, like, what do you think that looks like? You are the ambassador. You are what DPSCD is. So if you are out in another state, in another city, and someone asks you if you're acting a certain way, you are representing not only your family, you're representing your school district. And then we're like, oh yeah, that kid goes to DPSCD. You don't want that. You're like, oh wow, I met this amazing kid that went to DPSCD. They were really great. They go to this school. And then next, they're telling them, about the school. So our students are our ambassador. Everybody is an ambassador when it comes to DPSCD, because you're telling our story.
I love that. And then speaking about a younger generation and students and the next generation coming into our profession as well, Elizabeth, how much is misinformation affecting this younger generation in the age of social media and so many sources out there? How is it especially affecting that younger generation?
Misinformation is a problem for everybody kind of across the board. Younger people are not immune to this because they are digital natives. One of the great things that we've been talking about recently is this brand ambassador, a word that Constance used was pushing, and Antonise used the word intentionality. And what's really important for us to understand as just citizens and individuals who are practicing media literacy is choice and our intention as news consumers. You can't expect to kind of just exist in the world and let messages walk over you, or expect the information that you need is going to somehow find its way into your life. You have to subscribe and like and follow and actually make an effort to reach out to organizations that you trust. And this can be as simple as like following your school district on Instagram or Facebook. It can be as easy as signing up for Nextdoor or getting a free newsletter like Jeff was mentioning, because this is the type of information that you want. So as college students and as you're building your professional network, you should have a routine a routine of where you're getting information from. And it doesn't have to be kind of classic traditional news that's coming from CNN, but it should be information that is directly relevant to you and your profession. So is that going to be a professional newsletter? Is that going to be checking in on Twitter or somebody that you follow on TikTok that you know and trust? So whatever venue it is, we as individual news consumers kind of have to buy in. We have to be intentional about our media and information consumption as well. It's not just coming from the pushers of information. We also have to do our own polling of information in order to be informed people.
Yes, that's so important. Thank you so much. We're going to go to questions now. So if anyone has a question, we would love if you would raise your hand and then direct your question to a specific panelist if you would like. Perfect. We will start with Sailor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sailor. Thank you guys so much for presenting today. You guys did really well. I just had a quick question for really everybody in the panel. Have you guys heard of allsides.com?
I think I've heard of it. I can't say I'm very familiar with it. I mean, I sort of can gather maybe from the name what they are aiming to achieve, but I can't say that I've used it.
Yeah, of course. Well, I just wanted to kind of point it out because it is regarding news literacy and just news sites in general. And it kind of discusses, you know, people will be able to go on this website and actually rate how political these news sites are, and dependent on which side they lean on. So if it's, you know, far right, far left, if it's more in the middle ground, if it's more leaning left, leaning right, it's actually a really good website to look on if you're looking for something that's more in the middle ground that the population is kind of seeing. So I definitely recommend checking out allsides.com. It's a really awesome website, and I've used it for a lot of my assignments.
Thank you. And
Thank
we'll
you very
go to
much.
Liz.
Yes, I had a couple of questions as a public relations student. My first one was for Antonise, and you stated that some people aren't on social media, but public relations executives find unique ways to reach people. I was wondering what some of those ways might be that they can reach the masses for people that aren't on social media.
Yeah, so I had to make sure I was unmuted. Yeah, no, some of those ways, they can be very traditional, guerrilla marketing type situations where you're in the neighborhoods, you're at the barbershops, you're at the churches, you're at the grocery stores, whether there are flyers or there's handouts or I'm not a huge fan of billboards unless there's a lot of different layers and elements in that campaign, but there's just other visual ways of reaching certain people. Also acknowledging language, like not everyone receives or knows certain nuances or will respond or receive certain information if it is spoken in a language that they could understand as well too, whether it's just something that's completely not English, whether it's English or Spanish, or just, different sayings or ways of getting that information out. So yeah, if it's not social media, maybe it's something more like a flyer, a banner, a handout, things of that nature. Like if you think back, like what maybe they used to use, a few decades ago before social media, those are some of those different other ways. And I think being able to utilize those still, not only relying on social, I think makes us stronger communicators and practitioners to make sure that everyone is able to receive this information. So it could even be like shirt. I meant to mention, like we had like this whole t-shirt thing, like we had a whole campaign and we had it on our shirts and everyone was wearing it around that preventative care campaign. It was Don't Touch My Care. So we had, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Solange's song, Don't Touch My Hair. We just kind of changed that and we put it on shirts, we put it on flyers, we put it everywhere. So it was kind of got connected in that way. So yeah, have fun with it. I hope, did that answer your question?
Yes, that answered my question. Thank you. And I had one more for Jeff. And the first example that you stated was the study on anesthesia and with climate change. And he said it was taken and ran with by political speakers. And my question is, when it gets out to political speakers and gets to the masses in that way, how are you able to combat this once it's so far out there as a public relations specialist?
Yeah, there's, once that happens, there's really only so much that you can do. I mean, we put out a statement, we sent out a statement in the form of a media advisory, basically, to our media contacts, but basically saying this is what's being said, here's our statement on it. They used very strong language in it, very in the sense that definitive. So we said that what's being reported is patently false. So there's no kind of room for interpretation that maybe, what they were saying was true. And then that statement was also shared across our social media channels and our internal channels. So, I mean, you do, you do it the best you can, basically. But those unfortunately, in this era that we live in, political commentators have such a humongous reach, and when it gets to them, kind of reeling that back in can be extremely challenging.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And Michaela?
Oh, Dr. Stoichev, my question's for you. So today we mostly discussed the spread of fake information, but reporting on biased information is also considered fake news. I would love it if you could just talk about how we can determine what news is biased, especially if it's not super obvious.
So our US system of news has an expectation for objectivity, which is the opposite of news bias. Bias is one belief that is imbued in a message. And usually that is a relatively overt if people are acknowledging it as bias. What I actually find more troubling is the characterization of objective information as biased if it doesn't agree with your previously held beliefs. So encountering new information that doesn't fit with my belief system, oh, well, that's got to be wrong. That's got to be biased. And so not having kind of an open mind to accepting and confronting your own belief system, and where does that come from, and what information could potentially challenge that belief system. So I actually think that bias, we have a multitude of information sources especially in our metro area, but in our larger society, that you can find any type of media message you want. And so what I'm more concerned with is people interpreting factual, objective information through a biased lens, that they're unwilling to change their current position.
That was a really interesting point. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions?
We have a question in the chat here. Oh, I know. So Constance, why don't you ask the question out loud and then that you answered, so that we can talk about it for a minute.
Sure, no problem. So the question came from Kevin, and he said, how does research inform professional practice in combating fake news and disinformation, and how can practitioners be better informed with what the research is suggesting? So I think I answered this correctly, Kevin. Let me know if I answered it for you. I was saying, when it comes to research, I believe you would have to look at it from a full scope, right? Why was the research created, and what issue or scenario ignited the research, right? For that research to be created. And then from there, once you figure that out, you should be able to pull from that to understand and see how many people touch this. It's not just one set of researchers that had wanted to touch this area. So it should be a lot out there. And then from there, as you're seeing it, you should actually see a pattern. And then you can see, okay, maybe this is true. Maybe this isn't true. And then actually the person who created it or where the scenario started, reach out to them. Sometimes just go straight to the source in terms of why the issue was created. See if you can get some information there. And then you should be able to deduct and understand what was true, what was fake, and decide from there. I hope I answered that for you.
Kevin, I also have a response to that. I think more partnerships like the one Veronica has proposed right now, partnerships like this, where you are embedding researchers within organizations that need research on where their messaging is going, who it's hitting, how that messaging is interpreted. I think there needs to be more collaboration between private industry and academics who do research. Right now, there is kind of this big shift, this big divide between the two camps. And a lot of times we're not talking to each other, but we're still trying to answer the same questions and solve the same problems. But we're doing it in a way that we don't really connect with each other. So the more we can partner with local and national organizations to conduct research that's relevant and meaningful to them, I think makes it so much more significant.
Thank you. And Lindsay, what was your question?
Lindsay.
So sorry, it
there
would
she
not
is.
let me come off mute.
There she is.
This is a question pretty much broad for everyone. I want to talk about rejection and how do you handle rejection in the PR space? If your campaign pitch or project is not received how you hope, what advice do you have for us entering this field on how to work through rejection and come to a solution for our clients?
Ooh, now that's big time. Nobody wants to talk about that. Go on.
Repeat that one more time.
My question is about just rejection. If your pitch or your project is not received how you would hope from your clients or from those that you're pitching to, how do you work through that to come to a solution to provide something, feasible for your clients?
So Lindsay, do you mean in general, or are you saying what happens if your key messages turn into misinformation? Like it's
Exactly.
misconstrued. Yeah. So maybe
Exactly.
that's what she's saying. Like you
Mhm.
have your well-articulated, solid key messages that align with your mission, that align with your research. You put it out there and it gets misconstrued. How do you handle that?
I mean,
I have an example. We'll go with, again, the pandemic is such a great example to talk about things and how we overcame a lot of stuff. So we had our partnerships, our community partnerships, GM, DTE, all of them. They provided laptops, devices to every student within DPSCD. So everyone had access to have a laptop. Well, it kind of somewhat backfired because these children have laptops and it's like, oh, we're providing access. We didn't fully provide access because if you do not have internet at home or if you do not have a hotspot, how is this going to work? Right? So it kind of, we were doing a great thing. It was still a great thing because every child had a laptop. Right? But now we have to focus on and then make a pivot to what does this look like in terms of access to actually Wi-Fi, right? And so now you have to build or sometimes create, and like I said, pivot to, okay, now you have to work with your internet provider. So then Comcast was able to provide those boxes. But if everybody didn't get the message around picking up a hotspot box and having a couple months free, we have to now create a new message, create that new campaign to now coincide with the free laptop, because at first it was just free laptop, but then we had to combine the two. Free laptop and internet access. And now it made for a more effective approach, because in the beginning it was great, but if everybody doesn't have access, it kind of went wrong. And that was a big piece, especially when we're dealing with the pandemic and everybody is at home learning. So we had to fix that. We had to work with our partners. We had to understand, how do we fix this? And that's how we fixed this. It was now, all right, now we need to connect with Comcast. We have to marry these two together. We have to marry this together. So now we can actually help the people. We didn't help it. In the beginning, that actually caused a lot of headache and heartache for parents, because they're crying, now my child does not have access. I have this, I went to the school, but what am I supposed to do now? So we worked really hard, quick, fast, and in a hurry to make sure that we married those two to fix that. So that's kind of what happened with us.
Thank you so much for the example. You answered my question.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Perfect. And Jessica, how about you?
Thank you. That was a great answer to the previous question. And one of the things that we've talked about a lot through this whole thing is how politics, whether it has a place or not in the subject matter, I want to know how you separate the two, if it's possible at all, and how you handle it when it is a problem, because often those two things are, the political side may not have the correct answer, but they're promoting that they do.
I mean, from a healthcare standpoint, we try not to get, too political. There are some things it's a little tough not to get political on, Roe versus Wade, for instance. But we work closely we have a whole government affairs office. And so, we don't necessarily, as a PR people, go out there and try to position the organization from a political standpoint. We try to just deliver, the information that people need, to make informed decisions about their health. But anytime there's concerns about where a message might land politically, or are we wading into waters we don't necessarily want to get into, we engage our government affairs colleagues and sort of figure out a plan from there.
And thanks, Jeff. And then we do have a question from the media literacy class. Somebody that they're joined together, tuning in on one Zoom link. But is there and anybody can answer this, the student said, is there an example of yourself while on the job falling victim to fake news or a misinformation piece? And then how did you overcome it? And that's a little bit different than what, like Constance said, they had to add on, like they put something out, a program, and then there needed to be another piece to make it effective. And that was clear. But have you ever, or do you know of your team or someone that actually, you checked and you double checked, because it's hard, and you got it from who you thought was a credible source, put it out there, and then you were like, oh, right. And then you had, what did you do in that professional space? How do you handle that?
I've read that in the chat. I've been trying to think of an example, and I just haven't come up with one. I'm sure that I've encountered
which is
it.
Maybe good, Jeff, right?
over the last 9 years, I'm sure that I've encountered it. I'm just trying to think of an example. I mean, I'll tell you, and probably it's just from having done this so long. I mean, when I see something, almost the first thing I do is look at where the website is, and if this is a credible website, and who's sharing this, and what's really the goal of what they're sharing. So I think just being a PR person, and probably all of us on this call are very critical, of the things that we read, and don't take things at face value. But I'm trying to think of an example.
We'll go to Lauren for now. What's your question, Lauren?
So my question is for Constance. I love that you use social media platforms to communicate with parents, but with miscommunication, do you ever run into any problems with using like Facebook or Instagram that would be maybe considered a non-traditional form of communication with parents? Do you ever run into any problems that like miscommunication wise?
I will say sometimes the parent will go all in on Facebook Messenger. They will provide all their information, and we're telling them, please call this number, or please call the school, because again, we're handling it from a central office standpoint, and we're giving them, well, they're not picking up, and did you try this number? And then so now we have to reach out to other people in other departments to try to help, because sometimes they will think this is where you're supposed to get all your answers, is from the Facebook Messenger. And it's like, no, I think I literally had this conversation with my son yesterday. He goes automatically to text, and I said, boy, pick up the phone, and you need to learn phone etiquette. I think this is a big lost with these younger generation phone etiquette, and you think I'm doing something right and it goes wrong. But I think they think by typing you fix it, when sometimes it's actually picking up the phone and having the conversation and actually contacting the school. They will come to us and we can provide them with that generic, that high level answer. Right, Lauren? But sometimes you have to go to the school, because the school, what I think is right from a high level central office response for our team to connect with the parent, sometimes they have to talk to that admin that actually handles this on a day-to-day basis, that is actually answering this question all the time and actually has a different answer from the answer that I may provide. So sometimes we have to redirect them to where you really need to get the answer. We are that, forward facing. We are the first person in command, chain of command with a lot of people sometimes. But then after that, you have to take at least 1 or 2 more steps to get the real in-depth answer that you may need, because I may not know that. I don't know how it looks for a second grader. Well, I do because I have a second grader, but I'm just like from a second grader parent standpoint, where a high schooler, those are going to be 2 totally different responses, but they're still coming to us thinking we have the answer for all of them, and we don't. So to answer that for you.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I actually think that that could be applied to a lot of different things, with the whole miscommunication thing, or misinformation thing, taking a couple extra steps to get directly to the source.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is Shelley, and I'm going to jump in. I have what might be our final question because I'd sort of like the 3 of you to think about it. I've heard each of you mention in one way or another the importance of positioning your organization or one of your clients, in Antonice's situation, as an industry expert, as a source of information yourself, so that people know to come to you. Let's go to the Henry Ford campus site and see what they put on about it, or let's see what Detroit Public Community School District, what did they say about it, instead of believing the media or the text, as Constance said, or the various social media. So how important, or I guess we already know it's important, like in what ways do you position, or have you positioned maybe in Antonice, your client, as an industry expert and as a resource for information, so that people just come to you and don't have to believe the media or text messages or Facebook?
Yeah, I think it's kind of speaks to those, like how to combat that is really something that we all know as professionals, being proactive and prepared. So it's kind of like you never want to like wait until something happens to get ready for, like, to get ready for it. You want to prepare for that ahead of time. And then also when it comes to positioning those clients, is what rooms do I need to have you in? What kind of conversations do I need you to already be talking about? So whenever this comes up, they're going to just call us because they want you to speak on it. For example, with the Boys and Girls Club, they're another client of ours. And even though they're, traditionally back in the day, Boys and Girls Clubs were, you go there after school, go play some basketball, play some games, whatever the case may be. But they really wanted to be more of in that, what is it? I can't remember the term for it, but they wanted to kind of shift how people looked at Boys and Girls Club and what kids were getting out of it, what they were learning while they were in those buildings and everything. So we really had to start positioning them to have conversations about workforce development. We had to put them in rooms and have conversations, or with our media professionals speaking more about entrepreneurship, like those other things that kids could now start to learn and gain through, where it's not just the after school program that we once knew. So that's kind of like doing those preparations. So now when there's ever a story about entrepreneurship and youth, they usually are calling to speak with Sean Wilson, who's the CEO, because he's already been having these conversations for the past 3 years as more of a thought leader around this. So yes, I think to start, and I know my colleagues can also, Constance and Jeff can definitely speak to it as well, but being proactive and prepared, and finding those opportunities ahead of time to be in those conversations, so that it's already top of mind when things do happen. So that'd be my kind of 2 bits in the example with it too.
Absolutely. I'd agree with everything Antonice just said. And one thing that our organization has done a few times I can think of, they don't do them all the time, but they have done like is anyone familiar with Reddit? Ask Me Anything. Anybody ever heard of that? We had some of our doctors do those, which obviously takes a lot of prep. We anticipate everything we think they might get asked, and then, try to help them have, reliable messaging that they can deliver in responses. And our social media team is very involved with that. But, that's one way to connect directly with people, and, any questions that they've got, they can go ahead and get a response to it right there. And that's one sort of, I think, off the beaten path type way to use social media. I feel like you don't see as many organizations turning to that. But, there's other ways too. I mean, you can, obviously video is very powerful, and with things like Reels now, there's, ways to deliver powerful messages in a real concise manner. So, I mean, those are some of the ways we connect directly.
I would agree, Jeff and Antonice, like proactive, getting ahead of it. I think when it comes to us and dealing with education, we know our pillars, our key plans of action, right? Enrollment, count day. We had count day right before we went out for winter break. But what we did, we changed the narrative. Instead of, make sure you're here on this day to count so we can get our funding. It went to every day counts, which it does. Every day counts. So being able to have that conversation, understanding that certain schools are looking for re-enrollment, enrollment is an everyday thing. It doesn't just happen at the end of May for the summer and starting sometimes in August and September. Enrollment is every day. So what we've started to do is constantly having those conversations every day. So it will come in one day, you may see enrollment. Another one is every day counts. Another one, we're talking about hiring. We are, we're doing a big push for hiring right now. So if you ever think about coming into education, just go to DPSCD, and check out some positions. And it's more, and that's the other thing, it's more to, that's another conversation. It's more to DPSCD than just being a teacher. And people don't realize that. Like, you had a lot of people who didn't even know that we had a whole marketing campaign department here pushing out. We're like, how do you think you get your collateral? How do you think it's created? It's our graphic designers. But it's, for us, it's now just a continual conversation and being proactive. And sometimes it's about when we are pushing out that information. Sometimes it's going to be heavy, but at all the other times, it's just going to be a trickle. You're going to see a little bit here and there. So it's always going to be top of mind.
Thank you. And just
Oops, Veronica, did Veronica freeze for everyone else or just for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, if she starts moving again, I'll be quiet. But in the meantime, I know what she was going to ask. In conclusion, we're thinking Elizabeth, Dr. Stoychev, could you maybe leave us with some thoughts? Because this seems very daunting. And I'm wondering how the students, the many students who are on this call, and us, professionals as well as academics, how can we go forward in both our personal and our professional lives, acting responsibly? How do we combat all of this so that we can be more effective in our personal and professional lives, Dr. Stoychev?
Thanks. I think that's a great question to end on. I also think it's, the $1 million question. It's incredibly hard to answer. I think it comes back around to intentionality, that as practitioners, we need to be intentional in the types of messaging you're putting out, the types of audiences you're hoping to reach, the intended effects you want to have. And then as audience members, as consumers, as citizens, we need to be intentional about our use. And so the more you think about where you're getting your information, not just news, but how long you're spending on social media and who are you following on social media and what impact is that having on you? All of those things are going to be really important to the type of person that you're going to be, the type of campaign that you're going to have, and the success you're going to have in both your professional career and then also your personal life. One of the things that we talk a lot about is mental health and media, making sure that your media is contributing to a positive mental health. I think this is particularly true for people who work in a media industry. We spend a lot of our time with media, with information, and making sure that we're protecting our own mental health and we're doing things that refresh us. We're taking breaks and stepping away from information and media when it's too much. We're following and being intentional with our use. And then we're being deliberate about the types of messages that we're consuming ourselves so that we can then be effective communicators as practitioners.
Thanks, Dr. Stoychev. I think it's not random that you ended our event today with the message of self-care, because we know that when we're tired, when we're stressed, when we're hungry, right, we are more likely to make bad decisions and in our personal and professional lives. But that's a whole nother event and panel discussion. But I think also we are more likely to misinterpret and not discern, right? Truthful information when we are tired or hungry or stressed. So it's very important that we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. Oh, that was so nice. Okay, I just want to thank you all. I mean, honestly, we had over 50 students on today because one was a full class. So I want to thank you, Antonise, Constance, Jeff, and Dr. Stoychev for spending your hour and 15 minutes with us. And for Veronica, I know her power flickered, so she went away and she's texting
Thank
right
you.
now. Oh,
I'm
there
back
you are,
on my
Veronica.
phone. Sorry about that. Thank
It's
you so
okay.
much for joining us today. And if you would like to put your knowledge to the test tomorrow, we will be at the Student Center from 10 to 12. And you can see if you can spot the fake news. So I hope you all feel empowered, informed, and engaged after our conversation today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a care.
Thanks for having us.
Be careful.
Thanks
Thank you so
all.
much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.